Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever loved someone who always seemed just a little out of reach? Someone who gave affection like a rare gift, never fully present, never fully committed, and then, as if by magic, they suddenly disappear, leaving you wondering what went wrong. This is the world of the avoidant partner. They thrive on independence, emotional distance, and self-preservation. They are often charming, capable, and seemingly untouchable, but underneath there is a fragile core, a fear of being vulnerable. And there, standing on the other side, is the super-empath, a person who feels everything, who sees past the walls, who gives endlessly. But even the super-empath has a breaking point. They can hold space for someone else's fears for a long time, but when their own needs are consistently unmet, when their love is met with resistance, avoidance, or detachment, something shifts. The moment an avoidant breaks is not dramatic, it's quiet, almost invisible. It happens when the super empath finally recognizes that love is not enough to heal someone else's emotional distance. They stop chasing, they stop giving, and they finally detach, not out of anger, but out of clarity. They realize that their own emotional well-being cannot be sacrificed for someone else's inability to connect. This detachment is a powerful turning point. It's a moment that forces both parties to reflect. For the avoidant, it can spark fear, regret, and self-awareness, but it can also ignite personal growth. For the super empath, it is liberation, a reclaiming of their energy, their boundaries, and their sense of self-worth. Love, in its healthiest form, is reciprocal. No one should feel like they are pouring from an empty cup. And sometimes the most profound transformation comes not from holding on, but from letting go. The moment an avoidant breaks is not just the end of a chapter. It is the beginning of a story where both people are forced to confront who they are and what they truly want. Remember this, empathy is a gift, but it is not a lifeline for someone unwilling to meet you halfway. Your emotional energy is precious, and the moment you realize your worth, the world around you starts to shift. Thank you. Avoidant individuals are fascinating because they are a study in contrasts. On the surface, they often appear confident, self-sufficient, and emotionally unshakable. They can navigate life with a kind of calm detachment that makes them seem almost untouchable. People are drawn to them, not just because of their independence, but because there is an air of mystery and allure surrounding them. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't wear their heart on their sleeve, who maintains a sense of autonomy and space in every interaction. However, underneath this confident exterior lies a deep-seated fear of vulnerability, intimacy, and emotional dependency. This fear often dictates their behavior in ways that are subtle but profound. Avoidants have an instinctive drive to protect themselves from what they perceive as emotional threat. Intimacy for them is often synonymous with potential loss of control or risk of rejection. So rather than openly expressing their feelings or engaging fully in emotional exchanges, they create distance. This distance can take many forms. It may be physical, such as avoiding spending too much time together, or emotional, such as deflecting deep conversations or minimizing expressions of vulnerability. Avoidants often excel at giving the illusion of connection while keeping their true emotions carefully guarded. Their independence, which might look like confidence to the outside world, is often a defense mechanism born from previous experiences, fear of hurt, or a need to maintain self-reliance above all else. The charm of an avoidant comes from their ability to be present in small, carefully chosen moments without fully surrendering themselves to the relationship. They may shower their partner with affection sporadically, creating a sense of excitement and unpredictability. For the super empath, this can feel like a puzzle. These moments of connection are intense and deeply meaningful, but they are interspersed with periods of withdrawal and detachment. The empath, feeling everything so profoundly, often interprets this pattern as a challenge to be solved, believing that if they give enough love, understanding, and patience, they can break through the walls the avoidant has built. What the empath may not immediately recognize is that these walls are not meant to be broken. They are a protective structure, a habitual response to emotional risk. Avoidants tend to operate from a lens of self-preservation. They are highly attuned to discomfort and conflict, and their instinct is often to retreat rather than confront. This is why even small emotional expressions from a partner can trigger an avoidant response. To them, Vulnerability is a double-edged sword. It is necessary for intimacy, but it also feels like a loss of autonomy, which can be terrifying. Their behavior is not always consciously manipulative. Rather, it is habitual, almost reflexive. The patterns they create can leave their partners feeling confused, rejected, or undervalued, despite the avoidant's underlying desire for connection. One of the most challenging aspects of being with an avoidant is their ability to oscillate between closeness and distance. They can be intensely engaging, attentive, and charming in one moment, and suddenly distant or disengaged in the next. This push and pull dynamic keeps their partners emotionally invested, constantly seeking validation and reassurance. For the super-empath, this can be exhausting yet addictive because they are wired to notice, understand, and nurture emotions. They feel the avoidant's underlying struggle and instinctively attempt to bridge the gap, even when it comes at the cost of their own emotional energy. Understanding an avoidant is not about finding a way to fix them, because avoidance is rarely something that can be cured by love alone. It is about recognizing that their independence is both their strength and their shield. Appreciating this allows a partner, especially a super empath, to navigate the relationship with awareness rather than frustration. It helps them differentiate between moments of genuine connection and patterns that reflect fear rather than rejection. By acknowledging the avoidance nature, one can engage with empathy while also maintaining boundaries that protect their own well-being. The super empath is a unique force in any relationship. They feel deeply, not just their own emotions, but the emotions of those around them. They are highly sensitive to shifts in mood, tone, and energy, often picking up on subtleties that others completely miss. This ability to perceive and internalize the emotional landscape of a partner makes them incredibly compassionate, nurturing, and attuned. They have a natural instinct to care for others, to anticipate needs, and to offer comfort before it's even asked for. Their presence can be a grounding force for someone who struggles with emotional regulation or vulnerability. The super empath is not just aware of the surface level expressions of emotion, they sense the unspoken, the hidden, and the suppressed feelings that linger beneath the words. This makes them extraordinarily perceptive, often able to recognize the struggles of an avoidant partner before the partner even admits it to themselves. This sensitivity, while a gift, comes with an inherent challenge when it comes to relationships with avoidant individuals. Because empaths feel so intensely, they often absorb the emotional turbulence of their partner. They notice every withdrawal, every subtle shift in tone, every hint of disengagement. To the super empath, these moments are not trivial. They are signals that something is wrong, and their instinct is to respond. They want to repair, to soothe, and to bridge the gap that avoidance creates. The empath's mind is constantly analyzing, constantly questioning, constantly searching for a way to restore balance and connection. They are motivated by love, by compassion, and by a desire to create harmony, sometimes at the cost of their own emotional energy. The super empath's capacity for empathy can make them feel responsible for the avoidant partner's emotional state. They may believe that their love, patience, and understanding can heal the avoidant's fears and insecurities. This is where the delicate balance begins to tilt. The empath gives tirelessly, often without realizing how much of themselves they are investing. They offer reassurance, validation, and affection, sometimes repeatedly, hoping that their partner will eventually meet them halfway. But avoidants, by their nature, are resistant to being emotionally fixed or penetrated. They require space, autonomy, and time to process their feelings on their own terms. No amount of love, no matter how profound, can force an avoidant to become vulnerable before they are ready. What makes the super empath so powerful in these dynamics is their unwavering commitment to understanding. They are able to hold the space for someone else's fears, contradictions, and emotional walls without judgment. They can navigate emotional turbulence with patience and insight that most people cannot match. They see the avoidant not just as they present themselves, but as they truly are beneath the surface. The scared, guarded and vulnerable person who longs for connection but fears it at the same time. This understanding allows the empath to respond with compassion rather than frustration, to offer support rather than demands. Yet this extraordinary sensitivity is also what makes the super empath susceptible to emotional exhaustion. Because they give so much of themselves, they can become overwhelmed, depleted, and even resentful when their efforts are not reciprocated. They start to feel unseen, unappreciated, and taken for granted. The empath's natural inclination to give can paradoxically lead to a sense of loss of self if they do not recognize the importance of boundaries. Over time, if the avoidant partner consistently resists connection, the empath begins to confront the difficult truth. Love alone cannot sustain a relationship if it is not met with mutual effort and presence. The super empath's journey is one of both gift and challenge. Their ability to feel deeply and love unconditionally makes them extraordinary partners, but it also requires awareness and self-preservation. They must learn to discern between healthy compassion and self-sacrifice, between understanding their partner and losing themselves in the process. Their strength lies not only in their capacity to empathize, but also in their ability to recognize when detachment is necessary for their own emotional well-being. Even the most patient, understanding, and giving super empath reaches a breaking point. There comes a moment when love, effort, and empathy are no longer enough to bridge the gap created by an avoidant partner's emotional distance. This breaking point is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it carries immense significance. It is not marked by dramatic outbursts or confrontations, but by an inner shift, a quiet, firm realization that the relationship cannot thrive under the current dynamics. The empath begins to recognize that their constant giving and seeking of connection is met with resistance, avoidance, or indifference, and that no matter how much they pour themselves into the relationship, their emotional needs remain unmet. This realization can be both painful and liberating because it forces them to confront the truth. Love is not enough when it is unreciprocated. The breaking point often starts with small moments of awareness. The empath notices how they feel drained after interactions, how their attempts at closeness are met with subtle deflections or emotional withdrawal. They feel the growing imbalance between the effort they invest and the response they receive. Every effort to reach their partner emotionally is met with hesitation, distance, or avoidance, and over time, this pattern accumulates. The empath begins to see that their emotional energy is being consumed without replenishment, and that the constant cycle of giving and feeling unseen is unsustainable. This is the moment when the empath starts asking themselves questions that they may have avoided for months or even years. Am I being heard? Do my feelings matter? Is this relationship meeting my emotional needs, or am I simply filling a void that my partner is unwilling to acknowledge? This breaking point is not about anger or resentment. It is about clarity and self-preservation. The super empath comes to understand that detachment is not a punishment or a rejection. It is an act of self-respect. By choosing to step back, they protect their emotional well-being and establish boundaries that have long been ignored or overlooked. The decision to detach often comes after repeated attempts to connect, reassure, and nurture, all of which have failed to create lasting closeness. It is the quiet recognition that their love cannot force the avoidant to change or to engage in ways they are not ready to. The empath begins to prioritize their own needs, acknowledging that their emotional health is just as important as the connection they wish to maintain. The breaking point also carries profound implications for both individuals in the relationship. For the avoidant partner, the empath's detachment can serve as a wake-up call, a mirror reflecting the consequences of emotional unavailability. It can spark introspection, self-awareness, and even growth, as the avoidant begins to see the impact of their avoidance on someone who deeply cares for them. For the super empath, detachment is transformative. It allows them to reclaim their energy, their boundaries, and their sense of self-worth. It is a moment of liberation, a turning point where they recognize that their value is not defined by how much they give, but by their ability to honor themselves and their needs. The breaking point is rarely instantaneous. It builds gradually, like a tide rising beneath the surface. Each unreciprocated gesture, each moment of emotional withdrawal, and each instance of avoidance contributes to a growing awareness that something fundamental is missing in the relationship. When this awareness becomes undeniable, the empath finally makes a conscious choice to step back, not as a form of punishment, but as an affirmation of their own worth. This is the essence of emotional maturity, understanding that love, while powerful, cannot compensate for imbalance, resistance, or the absence of mutual effort. In this moment, the superempath learns one of the most important lessons of all. Detachment is not failure. It is a necessary and courageous act that signals growth, self-respect, and the ability to create space for healthier, more reciprocal connections in the future. Detachment, when it comes from a super empath, is a profound act of empowerment rather than an expression of anger or resentment. It is the moment when someone who has given so much of themselves recognizes that continuing to pour their energy into a relationship that is unbalanced is no longer sustainable. This act of stepping back is often misinterpreted by others as coldness or withdrawal, but in reality, it is a conscious and deliberate decision to reclaim emotional agency. The empath understands that boundaries are not limitations on love. They are essential tools for protecting one's well-being and preserving a sense of self. Through detachment, they assert that their emotional needs are valid, that their time and energy are valuable, and that love should never come at the expense of their own stability and happiness. Empowerment through detachment begins with clarity. The super empath becomes acutely aware of the patterns in the relationship, the push and pull, the unreciprocated effort, the emotional unavailability of their partner. They realize that their compassion and patience, while strengths, have been taken for granted or met with avoidance. Detachment allows them to see these patterns without judgment or denial. It transforms their perspective from one of frustration to one of understanding, helping them recognize that the responsibility for connection cannot fall entirely on their shoulders. This clarity is liberating because it replaces emotional chaos with insight and emotional exhaustion with a renewed sense of purpose. What makes detachment so empowering is that it is not reactive, it is intentional. The super empath does not behave in a fit of anger or bitterness. Instead, they step away thoughtfully, choosing to redirect their energy toward themselves, their growth, and relationships where their contributions are valued. This intentionality reinforces self-respect and encourages a sense of control over one's own life. It sends a clear message, not just to the avoidant partner, but to themselves, that their emotional health is a priority. In doing so, the empath cultivates resilience, self-worth, and confidence, all of which are crucial in maintaining balanced, healthy relationships in the future. Detachment also has a ripple effect on the dynamics of the relationship. For the avoidant partner, the empath's withdrawal can act as a catalyst for reflection. It forces the avoidant to confront the consequences of their emotional distance, potentially triggering self-awareness and growth. Sometimes it leads to regret, acknowledgement, or even a renewed commitment to connection. But regardless of the avoidance response, the empath's choice to detach remains a declaration of their own boundaries and self-respect. It demonstrates that love cannot coexist with chronic unavailability or neglect, and that emotional reciprocity is a non-negotiable foundation for any meaningful relationship. For the super empath, detachment is transformative. It allows them to reclaim the energy that was once devoted to trying to meet someone else's unfulfilled needs. It restores a sense of balance and empowerment that was lost in the cycle of giving without reciprocation. It reinforces the understanding that one can love deeply without losing oneself, and that protecting one's emotional well-being is an act of wisdom, not selfishness. This process of stepping back can also illuminate the empath's own desires and priorities, helping them recognize what they truly need from a partner in a relationship. Ultimately, detachment as empowerment is about choice and awareness. It is about stepping into a space where the empath is no longer defined by someone else's limitations, but by their own strength, clarity, and boundaries. It is the moment when compassion meets courage, when empathy meets self-respect, and when love transforms from a potential source of exhaustion into a conscious, balanced practice. Detachment is not about ending love. It is about preserving it in a way that honors both the self and the relationship, ensuring that future connections are built on mutual respect, understanding, and emotional reciprocity. Healthy love is built on reciprocity, mutual respect, and genuine effort from both sides. One of the most important lessons that emerges when a super empath detaches from an avoidant partner is that no amount of love can replace mutual engagement. A relationship where one person consistently gives while the other withdraws or resists connection is inherently unbalanced. Over time, this imbalance creates tension, frustration, and emotional exhaustion, particularly for the empath who invests deeply and relentlessly. The super empath comes to understand that true love is not defined by how much one can give, but by the willingness of both partners to meet each other halfway, to nurture, to communicate, and to remain emotionally present. This realization marks a turning point in their understanding of relationships and personal boundaries. Reciprocal love is not about scorekeeping or conditional affection. It is about an equilibrium where both people feel valued, understood, and supported. When the super empath invests their energy in someone who consistently avoids emotional connection, they begin to recognize that their own needs are not being met. The imbalance is not always immediately apparent. It can be subtle, manifesting in small disappointments, repeated misunderstandings, or moments of unreciprocated effort. However, over time, the empath becomes acutely aware of the cumulative effect, the frustration of giving endlessly and feeling unseen, the emotional fatigue from navigating a partner's distance, and the quiet but persistent sense of depletion. This awareness is the first step toward reclaiming their energy and setting boundaries that preserve their emotional well-being. The breaking point and subsequent detachment serve as catalysts for growth for both individuals. For the avoidant partner, the empath's withdrawal can act as a mirror, reflecting the consequences of chronic emotional unavailability. It challenges the avoidant to confront their fears, behaviors, and the impact of their distance on someone who cares deeply for them. This confrontation can spark self-awareness, introspection, and even personal transformation, though it is ultimately the avoidant's choice whether to embrace it. For the super empath, detachment is an act of self-empowerment. It teaches them that honoring their own boundaries is not only necessary, but also a form of love for themselves and for the relationship as a whole. By stepping back, they reclaim their sense of identity, regain emotional balance, and reaffirm the principle that their well-being is non-negotiable. The lesson of reciprocity also highlights the importance of conscious communication and clarity in relationships. The super empath learns that it is essential to articulate their needs, to set boundaries, and to recognize when a partner is unwilling or unable to meet those needs. This clarity prevents the empath from falling into patterns of overextension or emotional martyrdom, ensuring that their love remains healthy, sustainable, and enriching rather than draining. It reinforces the idea that emotional labor must be shared and that a relationship cannot thrive when one person consistently carries the weight of connection alone. Ultimately, the breaking point, detachment, and the lesson of reciprocity lead to a deeper understanding of what constitutes a fulfilling relationship. The super empath realizes that love is not about self-sacrifice to the point of depletion. It is about partnership, shared effort, and mutual care. Detachment is not an act of abandonment. It is an act of empowerment, a reclamation of energy, and a commitment to seeking connections that are balanced and nourishing. It is through this process that both individuals are given an opportunity for growth, the avoidant to confront their limitations and fears, and the empath to embrace their worth, define their boundaries, and cultivate relationships that honor their capacity to love without compromising themselves. Through this understanding, the super empath emerges stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the dynamics of healthy love. They learn that emotional investment must be met with reciprocity, that boundaries are essential, and that detachment can be an act of self-respect rather than loss. This awareness becomes a guiding principle for all future relationships, ensuring that their empathy remains a gift, not a source of exhaustion, and that their love is shared, valued, and sustained. The conclusion of this journey, the final insight that emerges from observing the dynamics between a super empath and an avoidant partner, is the profound importance of self-worth and self-respect. When the empath finally reaches the point of detachment, it is not simply about ending a cycle of giving without reciprocation. It is about reclaiming the sense of value that was gradually eroded by constant emotional overextension. This moment serves as a turning point where the empath recognizes that their love, compassion, and energy are not commodities to be consumed by someone unwilling or unable to meet them halfway. Instead, these qualities are gifts to be shared in relationships where they are appreciated, reciprocated, and respected. Understanding this is fundamental to cultivating a life of healthy connections and emotional balance. At the heart of this process is the understanding that boundaries are not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of self-respect. For too long, the super empath may have believed that love means self-sacrifice without question, that their worth is measured by how much they give, or that enduring emotional strain is proof of devotion. Detachment challenges this belief by demonstrating that true love cannot exist in a vacuum. It requires mutual effort, shared emotional labor, and recognition of each other's needs. By establishing boundaries and stepping back when necessary, the empath affirms their right to be treated with care and consideration, while also modeling a healthy approach to connection for their partner. This stage is also a time of reflection and personal growth. The empath gains clarity on the dynamics that have shaped their experiences, recognizing patterns that may have been repeated across relationships. They see the ways in which their compassion, while powerful, could have been misdirected towards someone who was emotionally unavailable. This understanding does not diminish their empathy. Rather, it strengthens it by teaching discernment, knowing when to invest deeply and when to protect one's own emotional well-being. With this insight, the super empath can approach future relationships with wisdom, ensuring that their gifts are shared in contexts that honor and sustain them. Moreover, this realization reinforces the principle that emotional resilience is cultivated through self-awareness and conscious choice. The empath learns that detachment is not abandonment, but a proactive strategy for preserving energy and maintaining clarity. By choosing to step back, they assert control over their own life rather than allowing themselves to be consumed by the emotional patterns of someone else. This empowerment fosters confidence, self-trust, and a renewed sense of agency, demonstrating that their well-being is not dependent on the reactions, availability, or validation of another person. Another critical insight that emerges is the understanding that love is not transactional, but it does require reciprocity to thrive. Emotional investment should be shared, respected, and valued. Without this balance, the relationship risks becoming draining rather than nurturing. The empath, having witnessed the consequences of imbalance, now recognizes the importance of alignment in values, effort, and emotional presence. This awareness equips them to cultivate relationships that are mutually supportive, enriching, and sustainable, rather than exhausting or one-sided. Ultimately, the super empath emerges from this process stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the principles of healthy love. They carry forward a sense of self-worth that is unwavering, understanding that their energy is precious and that detachment, when necessary, is an act of courage and respect for themselves. This final stage completes the journey. The empath not only protects their emotional health, but also sets the foundation for relationships that are grounded in mutual respect, authentic connection, and shared growth. In closing, the journey of understanding the dynamics between a super empath and an avoidant partner teaches us the profound importance of self-worth, boundaries, and emotional clarity. It reminds us that love, while powerful, must be reciprocal to be sustaining, and that stepping back is not a failure but an act of courage and self-respect. By honoring our own needs, reclaiming our energy, and choosing connections that value and nurture us, we pave the way for healthier, more fulfilling relationships. Thank you all for allowing me to share these insights today and for embracing the courage to love wisely, deeply, and with intention.